We're taking your calls on whether the King should apologise for Britain's colonial past. 0207 862 2222. That's because as we've all been waking up here at Channel 5 this morning, we saw footage of a protester shouting in King Charles's face during his official visit to Australia.
You committed genocide against our people. Give us our land back. Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land. Give us a treaty. We want a treaty in this country. You are a genocide. This is not your land. This is not your land. You are not my kids. You are not our kids.
Right. So, I mean, there's a bit of distance between them, but it was very powerful, and the rest of the room was silent. The protester is the Australian Senator Lidia Thorpe. She's a well-known Indigenous campaigner. She is an Aboriginal Australian herself. She's demanding an apology from the King, as you heard, for historic British atrocities. And by the way, this whole Aboriginal treasure issue with our museums as well. Do you think she's within her rights, Michael, or was it rude?
I mean, potentially it was a bit rude, but I mean, it was the kind of peaceful protest which I think we can all accept is very much legitimate. I doubt King Charles found that too sort of difficult to deal with. And obviously what she's sort of shouting about is a very legitimate grievance, I think. So in terms of Indigenous Australians, so when the British first arrived in 1788, there were 750,000 Indigenous people. Just over 100 years later, there were 117,000 people. So that's killing 5/6 of the Indigenous population.
Yeah, and Mike, we never have had a proper reckoning. We sort of talk as if Australia was discovered and it was a convict colony.
Well,
we don't make the point, rather like USA, that there were people there before.
A very small number of people there. I mean, I don't believe there is a colonial aspect to Australia. Captain Cook arrived in Botany Bay in 1770. That's when he landed. That's when we first set foot on Australia. I don't think we colonised it. We built Australia. I mean, have you ever been to Sydney or Perth? These are magnificent, fantastic modern cities, and they were built once settlers from Europe got there and developed the country like many other parts of the world. And it's a wonderful... And I don't know what that woman Lydia's talking about. I mean, you stole our lands. What lands did we steal, and who owns them if they were stolen from you? I don't get it.
Michael Walker.
Well, as is the case in most sort of settler colonial states, what happens is Europeans arrive. There is some land that sort of they take, and sometimes they try and trade with the Indigenous people. What they did in Australia was brought a lot of diseases, which killed a lot of them. But then what you also find is when they try to expand their colonial settlements, and if anyone resists who's from that country, then they massacre them. And there is very well documented, lots and lots of massacres, tens of thousands of Indigenous people who were actively killed by Europeans who wanted their land.
Often by convicts, interesting. So we sent our prisoners over there and said, oh, when you arrive, would you mind killing some of the locals?
Well, we told them to build their own communities. And
anyone who resisted got killed.
I was about to say, that meant there was a struggle for land.
OK, we will talk about this with the viewers in just a second. Let's have some calls on whether the King should apologise for Britain's colonial past in Australia. 0207 862 2222. King Charles is down under at the moment and has been confronted by an Aboriginal Australian senator. She's made some demands about historic British atrocities. Let's just have a look at the history here, which we do gloss over, really. When Europeans arrived in Australia, they called it terra nullius. It means land where there is nothing. In other words, it's an absolute free-for-all as far as they saw, because they couldn't really see anybody there. And what they didn't clock was that there were between 300,000 and 1 million local Indigenous inhabitants whom we now call Aborigines. And when they got in the way of them, they tended to die or simply be cleared out the way. And so therefore, you've lost about 200 years of Aboriginal culture, history, dancing, whatever, in the service of the British Empire. And part of this thing originally, of course, was to move our convicts from Great Britain to this new land of Australia. So it was, I mentioned James Cook, there he is, 1788, which was the beginning of what they called white settlement of Australia. And you then had this situation where you have to dispossess the Aborigines on the credo that they really ought to be living like Europeans, like that. That's an old vintage film of European living. And they thought they made a classic error. There weren't many so-called natives along the coast, so they thought there probably won't be any inland, but there were. And that's where all the problems started, and particularly disease, smallpox, etc., caused them enormous trouble. They didn't turn back the British. They oversaw a massive decline in the Aboriginal population, random killings, punitive expeditions, organised massacres, and disease. And it's not a good chapter. And the question is whether we can say, well, it's so far away, it doesn't really matter anymore. You can see, by the way, more of that film on YouTube. It's by a guy called Paul Bullen. All right, let's take a call. Claire in East Sussex has been hanging on. Hi, Claire, what do you think?
Hello there. Oh, by the way, I've got a Harry indoors.
Oh, have you?
But
Okay.
anyway, yes, I have. No, I don't think so. It's happened. It really has. Also, you know, I mean, anybody that shouts like that, if you shout at me, I'll shout back. Unfortunately, the King couldn't shout back because it wouldn't be dignified.
You're not talking about
But no,
Mike
it's
Parry? No.
happened. And
You're talking about the senator? Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sick of what's going on. We seem to be an apologetic culture at the moment. Just a digression, but I actually watch a TV, the old sitcoms, and the caption comes up, "Sorry if this offends you, it was context at the time." Why are we apologising? It happened. And, you know...
Claire, well, let's bring Mike in. Why are we apologising,
Well, can
Michael?
I ask a question to Claire, which is, do you feel proud, or do you feel pride of the good things that Britain has done in the past? When we think about sort of defeating Hitler, is that something you feel proud of, or do you just say that's nothing to do with me, that was people before I was born?
No, I do feel proud. There's certain... I think, really, bring it into current issues. There should be a lot of people now apologising for the atrocities that's been happening in recent months.
So if you feel,
I am.
if you feel pride, though, so my point would be, if you feel pride for the good things Britain did in the past, then you probably should also feel a little bit of shame for the bad things it did in the past. You can't just choose the good things.
Of course I... Well, no, but it's a mixture, isn't it? But the thing is, you know, the King's gone in good faith. He's living with cancer, and I just don't think we should just be bringing up things that have happened so far ago. You know, he's come for completely different reasons.
All right, Claire, thank you so much. And regards to Harry. Ruth in Lincolnshire, hi.
Hello, Jeremy. Jeremy, and of course, I'd like to say hello to the panel.
Brilliant.
Oh, really? I cannot believe how this country thinks it can wallpaper over its history and say, well, it's different times, let's start afresh. You know, Charles knew that he was going to have problems with this tour. Graham Smith was over there 2 weeks ago saying people in his own country aren't happy with him.
Graham Smith. Help me with Graham Smith. Who's that?
Graham Smith, he's the Republic guy, is he not?
Oh, in Australia. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Now, we had, was it A.N. Wilson yesterday?
Oh, yeah. Our columnist,
in the paper saying Charles should call these drongos, call their bluff. He's going to this country. He's been invited to this country, and somebody representing Charles is calling Australians drongos.
Yeah, well, A.M. Wilson isn't representing Charles, but yeah, drongos is a funny old word. I didn't think we used that anymore.
It's not used anymore.
No, it isn't.
It's not even used by Australians anymore.
I don't even know what that is. Yeah. So, but there are some, Ruth. Here are some nice pictures. I don't know if you could see them, but the King and the Queen getting a nice warm reception.
Well, it depends on which TV company you look at. Now,
right.
what I am disgusted in is that this lady, she's a senator of Australia, perfectly entitled to her opinions, and she is pushed out of what is the Australian equivalent of the House of Commons. And we're supposed to be proud of that, are we?
So here she comes. We're just watching the pictures now. This is from behind. She's back. Never back away from the security guy. She should have stood there and let him carry her out. Okay, thank you, Ruth. Yvonne in Derbyshire, what do you think about this?
Jeremy.
Hello, Yvonne.
Good morning. Can
Morning.
you hear me?
Yeah, we've got to that in time. Yep.
Okay. Basically, in history, go through the empires, the Vikings, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the Egyptians, the Ottoman, the Islamic Empire, the Russian Empire.
You're good.
Do you hear any of them apologising for what they did throughout history?
Well, you raise a very good point, Yvonne. I'm trying to think. Wait, because those empires, I suppose the Austro-Hungarian one was well, that collapsed, so they're not around anymore. But should the Italians apologise for ancient Rome?
How far do you go with this? We have to learn from history, not tear it down, but learn from it. It is important how we treat people now.
Yeah, I totally agree with Yvonne. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, take the Spanish, right? The conquistadors, South America. Unfortunately, that ended up with Incas and people like that who were suffering. But you can't stop the development of the world. My point is that if Captain Cook hadn't gone to Australia, would it still be a country which was only inhabited by Aborigines? If so, it wouldn't be the wonderful modern country it is today.
Well, what I'd say is I think Mike actually made a really good argument for this protest before the break, because what you said is that when they went there, it was completely empty. You were basically using the language that the colonists used in the 18th century, which was to say, there's no moral quandary here, there's no one here anyway, this is empty land, we can live on it. Now, what Indigenous activists have sort of been campaigning for is not to say, let's ignore all the brilliant things about Western civilization and development. It's to say, let's not lie about the past.
We're not
and
lying.
to say,
Nobody's
well,
lying.
you were before the
I'm
break
not
when you
lying.
said Australia was empty.
Yeah.
There was no one who was cleared from their land.
I
They
didn't
just
say
went
it
to
was
an
empty.
empty place.
I said it had a very small population.
Well, it had 1 million people, didn't it?
A million people.
Five, six of them were killed.
Hang on. Have you seen the size of Australia? 1 million people. It's about 0.001% of the landmass.
All right,
No.
Yvonne, thank you. Thanks for our calls. Let's take some more after the break. Should the King apologise for Britain's colonial past? He had a perfect moment last night in Australia when he was confronted by an angry senator. 0208 calls on whether King Charles should apologise to Australians for Britain's colonial past. 0207 862 2222. Wow, we've had a good old chat about this. Sean is in the beautiful Isle of Skye. How lucky are you? Hi, Sean.
Aren't I a northeast Skye looking out on the Isle of Lewis?
Oh, do you live there, Sean? Or are you holidaying?
I know, I live there. Been here a long time.
Oh, my Lord. Let's just have a little moment to reflect on our sad lives that we don't live. We don't live where... That's it. We wish we were where you are, Sean. So tell us what you think about this.
Yes, and in fact, just on Skye, I came here actually, believe it or not, to help set up a Gaelic third level college.
Oh.
So been here since.
And you set the college up and it's going?
Yes, well, obviously it was an enterprise by local people with support from the Scottish administration at the time.
Oh.
But it's been very successful. It's now part of the University of the Highlands and Islands.
Wonderful.
Very
Listen,
nice.
I would love to talk about that. Give us your views on King Charles.
Yeah, I think in general, and this is very general, certainly I think wherever colonisation happens, and in fact, a listener there made the vital point. It initially starts with trading, and that's good. There's great relationship, there's mutual benefit, but when it crosses the line into colonisation and where the original people are pushed aside and treated badly, that is not acceptable. That has to be apologised for.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen so much now. But I guess we've got a lot of it in our past. And
Yes.
How do we do an apology without doing a massive payout?
Well, funnily enough, that's arising in many countries. Well, given how far back in history it is, I don't think you would end up in a massive payout. But I think as somebody born and reared in the Republic of Ireland, I think I can give an insight that an apology would be appreciated and doesn't necessarily mean compensation.
I hear you.
And a
And
good
I'm not,
example,
maybe there is a case for compensation. Thank you, Sean, very much indeed. Yeah, of course, Ireland is a very close at home example of all this. Shelley in Newcastle, hello.
Hello.
Should the King
I just
have
think
said sorry?
it's getting out of hand, this. We shouldn't be responsible for the people of the past. I mean, we've done cruel things to children in the past, going up chimneys. There's still countries don't accept gays. And can I just say, I'm just actually looking on my phone in Australia have been horrendous to the Aborigines. They took the children away between 1910 and 1970 and put them in adoptive care. I mean, they had a lot to apologise for.
But then those Australian
hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, but the Australian administrators were kind of descendants of the people we dropped there. So
200 years ago. I mean, you know, are we responsible for the sins of our fathers? If you took this to its...
It was 100 years after colonisation, yeah.
If you took this to its logical conclusion, shouldn't England and France be apologising for the development of the United States of America and the Native Americans who were all pushed onto reservations? I never hear that brought up because America is the powerhouse of the world created by Europeans.
And it became...
America became independent and Australia sort of didn't in the same way. It still is a Commonwealth.
Well,
it's still part of our history.
I'm talking about the plight of the indigenous peoples in both countries.
I mean, there is the same,
and on both continents.
Do you sort of celebrate our defeating the Nazis, for example?
Of course I do.
So you clearly do think that you can have an emotional reaction to something that's happened in the past and take some responsibility for it. So if you sort of relate personally to our victories, to what we did, which was good, shouldn't you do the same? Shouldn't you do the same for when we did bad things?
Yeah, but your comparison is with the near past.
No, but the empire was going until the 1950s and 60s.
Okay,
the Mau Mau rebellion was after the Second World War.
Shelley, anything more to say, Shelley, before we move on?
No, I just think we need to look to the future, and everybody's keep going to the past. There's a lot that needs to be solved in the future, what's happening now. Never mind looking what happened, what we can't control in the past. It's ridiculous.
Shelley, thank you very much indeed. You say look to the future. If someone nicks everything out of your house and you go to them and say, right, I want my contents of my house back, and you say, I think we should look to the future.
Yeah, well,
you would not be impressed by that.
Hang on. If somebody nicked a bike out of my garden shed 300 years ago, when my ancestors lived there, I wouldn't be walking them down the streets, and I want compensation for that bike that got nicked 300 years ago. Because society and the world develops, and unfortunately, unpleasant things happen.
All right, this is a good rejoinder. Anne-Marie in Derby, hello.
Oh, hello.
Hiya. Glad we got through to you. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks.
So what do you think?
I think, yes, I think he should, because he's in a unique position of trying to combine the antiquated with the new. However, I think if you substitute the word apology with probably the word highlight or recognise, it might move it along a bit. Apology can look like many things. Even a correct narrative of history can be an apology. And also, I think it would help to chip away at the systems that were built to protect usually one type of people. If we chip away at some of those systems that continue to divide us, just like we did with the working class, it's just this willful ignorance of the past of some peoples that continues to be uncomfortable for all of us. Because even when the lady was shouting at Charles, I felt uncomfortable for him, but also, you know, we are divided by our past, our histories, and we need to come together to move forward. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Melanie in Manchester, hi.
Hi.
Should we be apologising? Very simple question.
I'm not apologising. No. I think we need to move on from all this now, because it's where does it end? There's so much going on in the world now that I think going back so many years now is just a bit unbelievable, really, that we're
well, I think people who are gathered, they like to be known as aboriginals. Aboriginals feel they lost 200 years of their culture and maybe 80% of their population. So you know, I suppose if we walk off whistling,
our ancestors, it's not. It's we're being held to apologise for this, apologise for that. The world was brutal. You know, it's still brutal.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think we need to look at what we're good at now, you know. I think that's where we need to focus.
I hear you. All right, Melanie, thanks. Loads of calls. Sophie's in Bedfordshire. Were you watching these pictures of the King and the Senator, Sophie?
Yes, I was.
What do you make of it?
I think the King should take responsibility. The more he continues to avoid responsibility, the longer this becomes normalised, and everyone, you know, thinks that colonialism is a good thing when it's just resulted in systematic racism, poverty, economic inequality and violence. dispossession of people from their lands and territories.
I wonder what would have happened if we spool back history and we ban countries after, let's say, 1200, after they start to do international travel, from discovering anything or going anywhere. Whether the world would be a better place is quite an interesting thought. You don't think it would?
Well, no, I don't, because the world has to develop to embrace the skills the world has got and try and share them around the world with everybody else. That's what we've been doing for centuries. And that's how the world and society has developed.
Yeah, but I don't want anyone to share their skills with me if it involves me dying a horrible death, by the way. I feel I should put that on the record.
Yeah, I think ultimately what you want to do is you want to spread development via consent, right? Trading with people, as that caller earlier said. If you go to a place and you trade with them, brilliant. If you go to a place and you kill them, not so great.
I'll just show you one picture quickly, which is Charles and Camilla, King and Queen, signing a book of welcome. And they this is classic. He then realises, oh, there's another signature. Oh, it's me and Diana. In the same book? 30, 40 years ago? How does that happen?
Well,
that can't be a mistake.
Well, he was Prince of Wales then, wasn't he?
Well, he was, but you would think they might have turned the page.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your calls on this later.